Hey everybody! For today's Diaphrag Ag Science Cafe interview, we have Dr. Gail Langolato. Dr. Gail Langolato is a professor here at Oregon State University and is involved in urban and community horticulture extension, as well as a statewide Master Gardener program coordinator. With nothing else left to say, let's get straight into the questions.
What is an important job skill that most people don't talk about?
Um, Good question. I think that endurance and persistence kind of coupled together are important job skills that for my particular profession, it's taken a lot of time in school. It's taken a lot of hard work. And oftentimes I have to look further out to see the payoff for that hard work. And so I would say the ability to have good endurance, to stay the course, to be persistent in pursuit of my goals have been important job skills for me.
Gail, what do you feel was the most important step in your career?
Um, it's hard to choose one particular important step, so I will choose two. Once was when I was in the sixth grade. My sixth grade science teacher pulled me aside and she knew that I love science. And she said, you could be a scientist. And I had never met anyone that was a scientist, but just the fact that my sixth grade teacher said that to me was really meaningful to me, that she saw that in me. And then I will say that the next important step was the first professor who gave me a chance to work in his lab and to gain some of those scientific skills and credentials that allowed me to move forward.
So my question for you is that do you ever get scared of what you do?
You mean scared of insects or
Yeah, scared of insects, like the bees and the stuff.
no, at this point, not really. When I was doing my PhD work, I actually worked with spiders a lot. And part of what I had to do was look at them under a microscope, but I put them to sleep. So just like if you and I were to breathe in too much carbon dioxide, we would pass out. That's basically how you anesthetize insects and other arthropods so that you can look at them more closely. And I just remember one time I was looking at the spider under a microscope and it was anesthetized and it started coming back awake while I was looking at it under the microscope. And it literally did look like a horror movie. It was so big that I literally jumped back in my chair and fell over backwards and hit my head. But that was the only time. Normally, I just find them really interesting and am fascinated by their biology.
Hi, Dr. Lingolato. My question is, what experience has helped you the most in your career?
What experience has helped me the most in my career? I think as I was a student in the university, just finding other scientists, other professors who gave me an opportunity to work in their lab. I know I already said that is like an impactful point in my trajectory. But when they did that, it really opened up a whole new world of possibilities for me. Like I said, I knew that I wanted to be a scientist, but I didn't understand how that could happen. By having someone give me a chance to see what it might look like to be a scientist helped me really understand how to navigate the path that I wanted to walk to become a scientist.
Okay, so Gail, did you have any mentors? If so, how did you find them and how did that relationship help you?
Yeah, my two mentors, I guess, would be the scientists that let me work in their lab. One was Dr. David Wise, and I saw a job ad that he put up and I applied for that position. What's interesting is that I took his class as a sophomore in college, and I just thought that the type of science he was doing was pretty elementary and rudimentary. So anyway, I remembered his science because I was just like, anyone could do that. And I brought that up in the interview, and he was impressed that I remembered so much about his science that he gave me the job and really continued to be a great mentor for me. And then my second mentor would be my graduate advisor, Dr. Bob Deno. Bob was brilliant. I mean, so brilliant, but so fun. And I think that's what made a real impact on me, is that he knew everything. My God, that man was smart. He passed away, unfortunately. But like as part of our lab work together, we would regularly play football and play basketball and go on hikes. Like he was more than just like science all the time and do your work all the time. He loved to have fun and invited the people that worked with him to have fun. And it just made me see that he also wasn't fancy like a lot of other scientists, or like super fancy and kind of like stiff. Bob was not that. And he made me think maybe there could be a place for someone like me in science, because I'm not very fancy either.
How do you stay motivated and inspired in your career?
So being a professor, I teach a lot of students, and I love working with younger people. They're a lot more optimistic than I am, and I really love that optimism that comes with youth. They're very creative and fun and sometimes silly in ways that I've lost touch with. So working with younger people really helps to keep me motivated, and especially seeing them find their own passion and to grow and build that is really motivating. And then the other thing that really drives me is I I sincerely love science. I sincerely love the process of discovery that comes with science, including discovering that my ideas about a concept were completely wrong, and that there's something else I'd never even considered that might be explaining the phenomenon that we're observing. I just love science and I love learning. And if I could spend the rest of my life learning and being a scientist, then that I find incredibly motivating.
Okay, so what obstacles did you have to overcome to get where you are now?
The obstacles, there are a couple, and if I'm being totally frank, I grew up in a family that no one went to college. So even just figuring out how to go to college and what happens in college was like new for me, much less figuring out that there's a thing called grad school and what that means was like totally new. In order to get the jobs that I wanted, I had to move cross country 3 times. And so that meant moving far away from my family. My core family still lives in Baltimore. I have my husband and children here now in Oregon, but I still madly miss my sisters and my parents in Baltimore. So I think that just the mobility that's required when you pursue a science job in academia at universities is really tough. And then, I mean, I have to bring it back to being a first generation college student again, like the money issue and not having money, and not having, like, in order to get your science known, you have to go to these professional conferences that are held around the nation and that are held globally as well. And when I was in graduate school, going to those conferences so that I could talk about my science and become known by other people took 10% of my income. And that was really tough, but it's like something you had to do in order to get noticed. So yeah, those are, I think, the obstacles associated with being a first generation college student without a family that was well off. Thanks. I remember I was in California at the time, working at UC Davis, and I got an interview at a school in New York City to be a professor at that school. is just one example. And like normally when they invite you for an interview, they put you up in a hotel, but it was kind of odd. It was like New York City. So they dropped me off at the hotel. And when I get there, the hotel said that they didn't prepay for the hotel room, that I had to pay for it. And I just like remember like, it was like a big deal to be on this interview, just like sitting in the lobby and just like crying because I didn't have money to pay for my own hotel room. And why would they make me prepay it? So I had to call my parents in Maryland and have them give their credit card number to the hotel clerk so that I could interview for a job at a university that was crappy enough that they wanted me to prepay my hotel room. So it's just like those little things that like other folks might not think much about, but yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So we have maybe time in 4 minutes left for one more question. If somebody has a question that they would like to ask, if something came up for you, something that Dr. Langolato mentioned, and you wanted to ask a follow-up.
I have a question. Gail, what advice would you give to young people who want a career like yours?
Find good mentors. I mean, mentors that are really good at science, but also care about you as a person.
Awesome. That's great advice.
And then could I add really quick on top of that, like if it's a mentor that's well known, like my graduate student advisor, Bob, everybody knew him. He was so brilliant and well published, and just like associating with him opened up so many doors for me. He was also a great scientist who cared about people. I couldn't have asked for a better mentor.
Aya, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I have another question. As a fellow, I guess, first gen college and child in the family, did you ever feel like pressured to have to prove yourself or to have to get into college? Because nowadays, like social media keeps telling you like you don't need college, just start a business, make investments, and you're all good. So did you ever feel like any type of pressure to have to like prove yourself or to get a degree? And if you did, how did you find ways to deal with it or cope with it and things like that?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think that because neither of my parents and most of my family didn't understand much about college, there was no pressure, like no pressure at all. It was pressure I put on myself. Ironically, I think the biggest pressure was, most of my family didn't graduate from high school, if I'm being quite frank. And so I think that the biggest issue was that as I started going through college, that making sure that they saw my interest as not a rejection of them and their life, that there was tension there. But they're super supportive of me, super proud of me. It's just kind of like, it is a different world than what I grew up in. And navigating that different world and still staying true to who I am and who my family is was a big challenge.
Well, that was really beautiful, Dr. Langolato. I know we work together a lot, and so I feel like I learned a lot about you today. So thanks for sharing.